Welcome to the Patrick Real Estate Show, where we explore the fascinating world of real estate investing with your host, Patrick Switek. Patrick is a dynamic young entrepreneur and an accomplished real estate investor who's passionate about helping others achieve financial freedom.
For the people that don't know me, my name is Patrick. I'm founder of STR Nation, a community of over 4,000 short-term rental investors. We do a conference every year called the STR Nation Conference. It's an annual conference, around 250 people. This year, it's July 7th to the 9th in San Diego. Feel free to grab your tickets at str-nation.com if you want to just network. I will be talking about buying management companies at the event. So if that's something of interest of you, like definitely willing to dive in deeper and actually have conversations one-on-one with you guys and that kind of thing, just to get a better understanding like how this whole space works. So right now I'm 27 years old currently. I've scaled from 5 of my own short-term rentals. Decided, great, short-term rentals are awesome, but having to take all this cash and buy these short-term rentals outright strap my capital in some ways. So I needed to get cash flow. And so I got into the space of buying management companies almost by accident. So I've scaled from 5 of my own to 100 plus signed contracts in under 1 year. And that's just because I acquired 3 management companies. So that's the little cheat code on how I was able to scale so fast. This month, currently, we're going to make around $700,000 to $800,000 gross. Top line, obviously, we take a percentage of that as a management company. So you can just imagine like more or less how much we make. This month, I think it's going to be like around $150,000, $170,000 like to the management company and then expenses and that kind of thing. And whatever's left after expenses us. So that's the sheer mass which you can acquire through buying companies like this. It seems like there's a lot of experienced people here, which is awesome. The people that are not experienced, like you can still buy a management company. It's just having experience definitely helps, because if you have units already, it makes it a lot easier to build the rapport with the owners. Why? So I think the first question a lot of people ask is, why buy a management company? So the reasons that I found the appeal of buying a management company specifically, I did it for a lot of reasons, but one of the big reasons is like you get systems, you get employees right away, you get all of the SOPs that they have currently. Even if it's not perfect, it's at least something you can work off of. And that actually helps, especially because you're making cash flow day one. So you need to have some kind of systems in place. And some clients will never leave management companies. A lot of people say, I could just get these contracts. If I had that money, instead of spending on a management company, I can spend on marketing. It's yeah, but then you look at the contracts that these people have, and the strong contracts are nobody's going to leave those companies. There's certain companies that no matter how bad it gets, like I see Vacasa holding on to some really incredible properties, and I see some really bad players in my market in Joshua Tree, and they're crushing their clients. They're not doing a really good job for their clients, but they're still retaining those customers because they have insane contracts that they're hard to break out of or whatever the case may be. And so it's a slow burn. So some of those people will either sell before they even get a chance to come to you, or they will never come to you to begin with. Now, if things are okay for the management company, they would just never leave. Sometimes people don't leave unless they feel like an urge that they need to make a change. When things go bad is when people start making changes. So granted, it's going to be a lot harder to acquire those kind of clientele, especially those legacy. And if they do a good job, forget about it. If they're doing a good job and they're crushing it for them, then it's going to be even harder to get those people to leave. And so Frank's saying, look at a deal right now with 5-year contract renewals. Yeah, my last deal was a 2-year contract renewal. Like they're locked in. And so it's a lot harder. And then also you starting to keep it in mind, like the IP with our company that we bought recently, they own the IP. So there, if you leave, you lose all your IP. So your listings, your photos, your everything. And so you're left with nothing. You don't have a pricing strategy. You don't have nothing. You actually listings that leave the management company and just burn and die. And so that's a very common thing. Obviously, being able to acquire that, you just buy into those relationships and you get a transfer of authority is what I like to call it. So the previous owner is introducing you as a subject matter expert, saying you are in good hands. And on top of that, if you are a manager already, you can actually say nice things about, hey, they're able to do a really unique pricing strategy, have really good energy, or they're young, or whatever the advantage you have, or they have a photography background or film background, they're going to be able to create great listings for you. Whatever that is, like you can have that authority to you so that you can inherit those relationships. So that's the benefit right off the bat. And just hundreds of reviews. The loyalty of the staff is a huge one too, right? Like you have hard to get access to really good staff because they're already working with these big companies. And once you're a bigger company, if I like recently, like me buying into this management company recently that I did, I have all these people coming in, like asking for a job. I have too many people and not enough jobs for everybody. And so that's a really good problem to have because I have such great talent on my team and I'm able to just retain some of the best talent because I already bought into that and bought into the brand and all that kind of stuff. Now, there's the big thing that I heard that made me realize that buying companies was one of the best ways to scale was real estate. Everyone says 90% of millionaires are made in real estate. 100% of billionaires are made through private equity or acquisitions or mergers and acquisitions. That whole space of owning companies and buying companies and selling companies. 50% of the value for a owner of a company comes through a sale of the company. 50% is through the years on cash flow, but majority of it comes through the sale. So it's a really important aspect of the business life and having new blood coming in and really taking over. So why did I do it? This is the reason that other people do, but why did I do it? I'm lazy to a fault, not to a fault, to a benefit, because I don't want to work one by one, having to convince owners, okay, I have one property, let me get the second property. No luxury property is going to be like, I trust you because you have a portfolio of 3 or 5. Like it gets easier as you have 10, 20, 30, and it gets even easier when you have the best of the best. And so a client call yesterday came in and it's super easy to say we're the best in the area. You can decide to go somewhere else, but at the same time, this is what we do. We have properties exactly like yours, and we make these kind of numbers for those properties, and we're not guaranteed, but we can within reason say that you can do the same. So obviously that gives a lot of appeal to owners. So I really liked that aspect. I like the shortcut. I didn't like going one by one. I thought that was too slow. It's the whole aspect of short-term rentals and boutique hotels. Why do people buy boutique hotels? It's because you can have 30 instead of having 1 or 2 short-term rentals. And so it's just economies of scale. I used to also work at Avance. So I saw through Avance how they were acquiring other companies. I saw the big companies acquiring other companies. I was like, wow, that's so cool. And I didn't think that the little guy could do that. I didn't think that me or you or somebody individual or family could really do a business acquisition. I thought it was left for the big guys. So Avance is a company that has thousands of rentals across the United States, short-term rentals, and they're like a top 10 management company in the country. And I saw how they were literally buying the small guys. They had acquisition funds. They were buying the small guys out, getting into new markets. That's how they scaled. And those are the secrets that nobody was telling you. All the big managers are super hush about it because at the end of the day, nobody wants to tell you that they're going to be selling. So it's like the people that are saying there are on market management companies, don't get me wrong. But most times when you say, hey, I'm selling my business and you're working off of a book of business or have a certain amount of clients, you don't want that kind of publicity, especially when you're like big in your town, and towns, like small towns, like word travels fast. So when you're in a small town, you tell somebody you're selling, your owners are going to freak out. And having that sort of thing happen is mostly why these deals happen underground. And so like I'm analyzing a deal right now. It's happening underground. They didn't want to tell anybody because obviously they don't want to lose their company. And that's why I can't talk about who they are or what they do. And so that's the idea here. And then also the fact that businesses, unlike a short-term rental or having a few co-host properties is one thing where, okay, you're a co-host at that point. And you like a short-term rental, you can only have enough value as the comps say that your value is. So if there's another house that's a like comp, that's not a short-term rental, that's making $0, you're making 100,000, it doesn't matter what the valuation is the same. It's based on the comparable factor of the sales that happened in the last 30, 60 days, whatever. And with businesses, you actually have value that's correlated with your revenue. So if you're a better manager, if you have more properties, these are like sellable entities that you can take and sell. And so the current entities that you have are actually sellable entities. And so we're going to go into like the valuation and all that in this moment, but that's an idea is you have business entities that you can sell, which is something that a lot of people don't even know about in the space, which is why a lot of people don't even consider selling or think about selling, because they don't know that their business has value. And so that's a huge opportunity for us, obviously. And yeah, I think the big pivotal moment for me was when I had my short-term rental in the Smokies. I bought my first short-term rental in the Smokies, and it was in 2021. And that property was great. I put 10% down. It was a $306,000 property. I put all in maybe 40,000, 42, something like that. And I was making around 20,000 a year net. And so that's great. That's like 1,000 to 1,500 per month. And I could have just kept it going. But then eventually that property was worth 465,000. So my equity that was sitting there was around $175,000 worth of equity. And then my $175,000 was only making me $20,000 net. Right. And so I was like, this is great for leaving my job, because I didn't really need to live off of much other than like $2,000 a month. But I realized I need to do something a little bit better and get more cash flow. And this is not cutting it. So I sold that property, and almost equivalently, I bought a few things with it, like another short-term rental and things like that. But I bought a management company with that money as well. And so that management company, with the same amount of money, the money that I had, was able to produce me like 10, 15 grand a month. And so that was what I was making literally per year. So it's like in 2 months, 3 months, I was making what I could have done in a year that's with no expenses, obviously. Now, once you start factoring expenses and different things to buy your time back, obviously there's a cost to your time. And obviously with scale, that kind of thing happens. But anyways, that's a whole nother conversation. But the idea was either you make $1,000 per month owning your own rental, or you make $1,000 a month per property that you have that you're buying. And so that's the kind of ideas. Scale is just a lot better top line. So cool. So the rest of this training, I thought the best way to do this, and we will take questions. Like, trust me, at the end of it, I promise I'll get to all of your questions. But I have most of the questions that people ask me, and most of the common myths that I've heard from people talking to me about this concept. And I'm going to be outlining those things throughout. And I'm just going to go through some of the common myths. And then afterwards, we can maybe ask some questions from the crowd. And I just want to hear like what you guys have to say. But I think I might be able to answer a good amount throughout. So that's how I'm structuring this. So cool. False belief number 1, guys. I think the first one that I got was you need lots of money to buy a short-term rental property management company. Now, granted, my first one, I had the equivalent of that amount of money available to buy that management company. I didn't buy a management company with that money technically, because I used private money to buy that management company. I got a partner in to put the money down, and it's something that allowed me to get into the deal for $0 down. So the acquisition was 160,000 for the first one. It was 15 units, and I was able to put $0 down, because what I did was it was the idea was seller financing. We said, okay, we'll do seller financing with something called a seller holdback, meaning it depends on the performance on the back end. So we'll talk about that later on how that works. Now, 50% had to be down for the 160,000. It was actually a $200,000 valuation, but on the back end, if we didn't perform, then it would come out to less, which came out to less because it didn't perform on the back end. Sorry if you guys are not really following. It's hard. So I had to put $100,000 down. So I got my investor $100,000 down, my business partner, and then I was $0 in the deal, because I brought the deal to him and I said, hey, we have these short-term rentals together. Why don't we just get into management together? He said, yes, I'll put up the money. I found the deal. So I didn't put any money down. So with that 160,000, with the proceeds of the company, we were able to pay back that loan in the first year. So we're free and clear on that business. Now we have 50 something properties with that business, and that business is just cash flowing. So that's a really cool thing there. Also, another thing you could do, it's really correlated to the amount of rapport you can build with somebody. But the second guy was struggling really bad for my second acquisition that I ever did. So this is story number 2 of $0 down. Story number 2 was literally acquisition number 2. The guy was down and bad. He took out a high interest loan during COVID, that he couldn't repay, and COVID was great. So he took it on so that he can scale his business, and he realized COVID's not going to be a thing forever. And it got kicked him in the butt, and he started defaulting on it. And so owners weren't getting paid for 6 months. And that's when I come in and I hear that, I'm like, opportunity. And so I did something called the roll up. A roll up is basically there's a lot of ways to go about it, but basically we took their existing contracts and reassigned those contracts under our company. So we came in, they had around 15, 20. There's a lot of them that were not the best, but there were a few good ones and they were at 30%. So that's why I was like, okay, this could work. And even though the houses were okay, I knew at 30% it would make sense and we could do a lot better than they did. And so we took over these companies and plugged them into our systems. But the way we structured it, we said, look, you're already going under. You're going to cancel this company. Those people are not going to come. They're not going to really, they're going to leave and they're going to sign on with somebody else. Now, what we can say is if you introduce them formally to us, we built rapport with him. He knew who we are. He knew who we were and that kind of thing. If they sign on with us, we'll give you a 10% of whatever we make. That was the agreement. And we thought he was not going to take it. He took it. And so sometimes you just got to make the offer. You never know. And so we were like, we don't really care, but if we do, we'll give him a percentage. And it worked. We built good rapport. He trusted us. He wanted the best for his clients. And we got $0 down and allowed us to take it on. Now, why do people do $0 down? Either they're in a distressed position or you built really good rapport with them. A lot of times people want somebody to carry the legacy. And so we'll get into that as well. Another thing you could do. So when it comes to valuation of these companies, a lot of people ask me, how do you value these companies? With valuations, there's something called, if it's either a small company or it's a big company. They're valued differently. So if it's 30 to 40, less than 30 to 40 contracts, it's usually owner ran. Those usually go for per contract basis. So per contract basis, on average, people usually get 1 to 1.5x of the management revenue. So let's say that you're making it's 20% contract. It's making 100,000 a year. That's $20,000 for that contract. That's 1x. If it's 1.5, then that's 30,000. Math. So that's the valuation of that single contract. So if you're selling a bundle of contracts, when you're a smaller company, you're really not buying the systems or operations that much. Like usually once you get to 30, 40 plus, like you go higher, then you start getting into a realm where, okay, you have systems in place, you have operations, you have managers, you're buying a whole cohesive company. And at that point, you're usually going off of EBITDA. And EBITDA I always screw this up. It's like earnings before interest, taxes, and amortization, I think, something like that. Basically, it's like net, more or less. And so with seller add backs and things. So that's a whole thing. So let's say that you're making $100,000 net. If you're selling the management company at a 2x multiple, you'd be paying 200,000. The multiple usually goes between 2 to 5 ish. Now it depends on the market, depends on the contracts, depends on a lot of factors, but that's usually how we do it. And a lot of times, a lot of people just buy, like sometimes a big company will have a really good presence in one area, and then they'll have 1 or 2 Scottsdale properties or something like that, like a market that they're not really in, but they got a few. You can usually go to that company and say, hey, I'll buy these 2 contracts off you. You're not big in this market anyways. Like this is my market and I'm willing to pay you for them. And you could do something like that, right? You can have those reassigned to you. You can sometimes they have assignability clauses in their contracts or things like that. But usually when they don't, the way to do it is you could do that transfer organically, or you can have them resign. So there's a lot of ways you can go about doing that transfer. So financing options when it comes to buying management companies, SBA loan is number one. You could do 10% down and buy a management company. That's one way you could do it. You can do a private money situation. So my third acquisition, we raised all the cash for it, private money, because it was a cheaper deal than doing seller financing. And we rather have the scale of that. And so we raised it at 10%. Is there a cap on SBA loan? I believe there is a cap on SBA loan. I'm not an expert in SBA loans, but I have all the right connections. I have the lender that did that for us. The cap, I think, is 5 mil or something like that. I might be wrong. And a bit earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization. Yes, I forgot about depreciation. Correct. Thank you. So all the CPAs here, anybody that understands that world, thank you so much, because I am not that. Cool. Another way, which is one of the biggest ways, is seller financing. And seller financing depends all on rapport and on terms. And it's basically having the seller act as the bank. They will be the ones taking on kind of but it's a very common thing, right? Especially if you have them staying on for a long time. If you have them staying on and the transition's a year, or you're buying them out over time, that could be something where you can do something like that, or you can keep them as equity partner for X amount, but you're buying out their equity over time. There's a lot of ways to structure a deal. And a lot of times the deal might not be good until you structure the correct way and the terms make it a good deal. So you never say no just because of the price. And yeah, obviously you can do 0% down. It's a lot harder to do $0 down. Travis says, seller financing going 0 down. How is the best to structure the monthly in terms? There's no best way. It just depends on the situation of the seller, right? So it's like a case by case basis. Like $0 down, like you're gonna have to give up a little bit more on something else. So either you pay a higher price or you give a earnings. You could say, hey, it depends on what they're looking for. Are they looking to get out really quickly? Are they looking to get out right away? If they're holding it as a bank, rapport is everything, like Frank said, because all of a sudden, if they want to get out right away, you can't wait more than 3 years, and you have to have a balloon payment in 3 years. But if they trust you, they're like, oh, I can wait 5 years. I trust you. So it's very much negotiated between the buyer and the seller. But yeah, what is the ideal outcome? Do they want to sell right away and incur the taxes? The last company was like, I just want to sell right away. I want to incur the taxes. I don't care. We just want to part ways with this. We want to buy out 100%. Cool. So we had a month transition, and that's it. And that was fine. That worked for us too, because we didn't want them to be involved any longer either. We wanted them to retire and do their thing. So collaboration is key. I agree, Frank. That's really good. You don't have to negotiate price if you can negotiate terms. Yeah, exactly. So that's how you do that. So false belief, guys, you guys could theoretically, and I say theoretically because you have to be good at building rapport. You have to be really good at knowing what to say and what not to say, and how to structure a deal and how to come to terms and do all this stuff. And if you can come to terms with all these things, then you can make it happen. So there's one. False belief number 2. I think this one I hear a lot. It is risky. False belief is it is risky to buy contracts, and you can lose your shit. And yes, you can lose your shit in a lot of things that you do in the world. You can go upside down on a property. You can get screwed in the market. You can get screwed in buying businesses, just like anything else. And especially when you're leveraging a lot and you're doing $0 down, or you're putting a lot of money down and you're not doing seller add back. But there are ways that you can offset those risks. So we're going to talk about those ways that at least I do to offset my risk. One thing I like to do is called the seller holdback. And so really what that is, just you're holding back some of the funds and you're not paying out until you see the performance of the property. So the first management company that we bought, we had a seller holdback that saved us $40,000 in the final price, which was great because it was a $200,000 valuation around there. We put $100,000 down. And so the other half of the money, we got screwed on that deal, by the way. I just came in. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't do the right due diligence. I was just an amateur, but I wanted to get in because I wanted to learn. And so I came into this deal, and just the owners made it seem like everything was fine. Everything's fine and dandy. I didn't check to see the contracts that they have or how they're running the business. Turns out there was huge liabilities with how employees were classified. There was misclassification of employees, meaning that we could get really screwed by the Labor Board of California, which California is not really too nice with any of that kind of stuff. And we had so many open holes, and we tied all those holes up. If anybody wants to exploit me, like, I'm saying this because I've already tied all these holes up. But at the time when I bought the company, I was like, wow, there's all these things where we could actually, like, even signing on the dotted line, if something happened previously with an employee that slipped and fell, we were buying stock option. Like, we were acting as the new management company. So we signed off on the fact that, like, we take on all liability. And so the business could have gone under like that, and we would have lost 100,000. So due diligence is so important to helping make this a lot less risky. That, and then also the fact that, yeah, there's a lot of things with the process. Now, so there's going to be some churn that's going to happen inevitably, which is awesome with the seller holdback because you're going to be compensated accordingly for that. When we came out with those management contracts. We said, okay, depending on what we come back with in the first year, we're going to pay you that amount. And so what happened was 5 of the 10 or 5 of the 15 clients left, and which was great because first of all, they promised stuff that we couldn't deliver. And so there's things that were just miscommunicated. I didn't look at the contracts. I didn't do any due diligence. Like looking at everything is really important. I have a whole process for how I do due diligence now because of that first mistake that I made. I made all the mistakes, guys. It was not like a perfect thing where it's like a lot of money went into like lawyers and classifying employees correctly and doing the right thing. And there's a lot of stuff that happened. What SPV? Can you clarify what SPV is? I don't know what that is. But yeah, so basically that's how we did the whole thing. But here's the thing. You're getting lead flow as well as you're getting churn. So you got to consider that there's lead flow from that. And there's also brand authority and the ability to, like in that first year, I think we signed like 30 something contracts, 30, 40. We signed a lot. Those kind of things was critical, guys. And that also happens, but we paid off less for the valuation of the company. We paid 160,000 instead of 200 because we had the seller holdback. So that helps. Second thing is going to be all about the transition process. Like, how do you structure the transition process from the company? Are you going in and how is that being done? For instance, like the first one, they wanted us to do a certain thing. We didn't know what we were doing. They wanted us to pretend to be operators because that would be a great way to chime in. And we started losing trust with all of our clients because we came in as operators and they're like, well, you guys are operators, not owners. We're like, we're owners, but they said operators to make it an easier transition process. And now you're just coming off the wrong bat. Like it just looks bad. And so that was something that they didn't know and they didn't know what was going on. And that was a transition period for us as well. But if you have a strong transition period, like our last one was incredible. We came in, we had a goal, right? We had a whole SOP of what we're doing and what the first 30 days is, what the first 60 days, first 90 days. We did this in March. So we're in like the 60 to 90 day range now. And it's been so smooth. It's been so like, obviously we worked really hard the first month because you're transitioning, you're learning everything, you're meeting the owners, you're doing changes, like things like that within reason. So that's the way to do it. And so transition wise, if you have an owners that are like supporting you in the transition and they're with you and you have it very clearly laid out in the contract how that works, then you're going to be fine. That actually makes you build strong relationships off the bat. You can actually mitigate a lot of the things that they don't like about the previous owners, or they sometimes will talk shit or say things about the previous owners. We're like, oh, we didn't like this or we didn't like that. Oh, we're addressing this and that. So everyone's always got something to say. So having that allows you to structure a really great conversation for the transition. Now, so the other thing is also the last thing, which is one of the most important parts, is going to be contracts. At the end of the day, you're buying contracts. So the stronger the contracts are, the less risk that you're taking with the business. When we bought our first business, the contracts were month to month. You can tell that with a month-to-month contract, there's a lot of risk involved. Now, with the last company that we bought, we are at 2-year contracts. We own the IP. We own the listings with hundreds of reviews, with 100, 200, 300 reviews. We have great employees that have great relationships with everybody there. The employee contracts are really great in place. The systems are there. The operations, the insurance is there. The rights, everything. Like we checked off all of the boxes. They're running a business. And it was a functional business. And we understood that there were some things the owners were doing that were going to offset. But at the same time, the numbers made sense. And so we're willing to pay money and buy a company when they have all this in play. Now, if they don't, that's why you have seller holdback and you have other ways to de-risk the acquisition. But yeah, I think there's that. And there's just even there's somebody, and I think this was what made me feel a lot better. There's one of the owners that had 2 properties with the last business that we bought and co-host company. We literally had this guy that met up with us because we met up with all the owners. And he said, you know what? You guys are great. Yes, I'm super excited. This is going to be amazing. You guys clearly have the expertise that, that we were looking for, and we're excited. And then what happened is next, like 2-3 weeks later, he emails us and says, after consideration, I've realized that I don't know you guys. even though you guys are great and you guys sound like you're doing all these good things, but I want to go with somebody that I actually know. So I'm going to be leaving. And we responded and we said, if you want to leave, just know you're going to lose all your IP. You're going to lose your listing. You're going to lose everything. I know you're looking to sell, and having a strong company also helps with that. And he just didn't, he was like, yeah, you guys are right. He just didn't respond. He just staying with us in the contract. Like, he's not leaving. And so for him, he's realizing that even if you wanted to leave for whatever stupid reason, you have the contracts to fall back on, which is so key. So good contracts all day. And yeah, just good due diligence. Like, the first business I acquired, I didn't know what I was doing. Both of my managers left. Yeah, it was just nuts. So I'll go into all that in a moment, but that's the same belief of it being a risky business to buy. Just a couple things so Travis said, in a high level, what are some key things in your due diligence process? There's a lot: financials, sales, balance sheets, customer diversification, contracts with employees, with owners, every owner contract, every employee contract, that kind of thing. There's also companies that I'm connected to. I have brokers, I have lenders, I have lawyers that only focus on mergers and acquisitions. And they're the best and the best of this specific thing. And I just have them deal with it. And I just let them submit their findings on what they find to be a risk or not a risk. That's probably due diligence. Do you keep their branding? Yes. So John, like, you could keep the branding or you can roll it up. So second one, we rolled it up. So we didn't keep the branding. We had them reassign the contracts to us. With the first company and the third company, we hold both of their brands. The branding, really, you can still use the same property management software. You just have it dish out to different accounts. You can still do everything with separate brands, but you can also combine them together. I know V-Trips, when they acquire, so will just gallop them up into their own branding. So they do that. But there's other companies like V-Trips, which when they buy, they'll keep the branding, but they'll be like, let's say it's called Hometown Rentals. It's Hometown Rentals powered by V-Trips or by V-Trips. Hyatt has Hyatt Place and higher brands of Hyatt. Every brand has separate sub brands, if that makes sense. On your first acquisition, what was the cost to purchase the company? I mentioned this. It was $200,000 cost up front, but we ended up paying $160,000 because of the seller holdbacks. After you paid off your loan to purchase, how much did you net every month after paying all your monthly expenses? So with that business, the problem was it was showing a lot on the books, but we didn't do the right way to analyze the deal. We didn't analyze it correctly, and we didn't use anybody. And I just looked at it and I was like, this will be fine. The owners aren't really doing that much. And I realized that the owners are doing a lot more. And so I had to hire for that. So we ended up just like netting like 5K or something like that, which was fine because we were just starting out. But eventually we're netting at that business this last month, we netted 40,000. It depends, right? It's always in business, it's always it goes ebbs and flows between, okay, the more you work in the business, obviously the more you're making, but the more you're working more in the business, but then you buy your time back with employees and you have more overhead, but then you're working less in the business, and then you acquire more clients, and then you have the same thing. So you have to balance that, and you have to always make sure your profit margins are healthy. So that's pretty much like it's like running a business. Yeah, but like monthly cash flow, like it depends. If you're analyzing it correctly, like the last company we bought, if we analyze it correctly and we're making good cash flow and we didn't have to do any changes off the bat that impacted cash flow, we get the cash flow day one. It's just like my first acquisition was just not good because I didn't do the right due diligence and I overpaid. But at the same time, I'm glad I did it, because if I didn't do it, then I wouldn't be in the position I am today. So you guys could figure it out yourself and do that kind of thing, or you can ask me any questions, like happy to help. But how are you handling the contract when owners want to sell the property? So it depends on the contract. So Tony, like if a contract, so like the previous company, the company I have right now, I just bought recently, like they own the IP. So like the people will still want, when they sell the property, they'll still want to work with us because we own the listing. And if they don't want the listing and they want to self-manage, then they don't want the IP anyways because they think they can do it better. So for us, it doesn't really matter. But there's some management companies that are binding and don't allow you to sell. If you sell, then it stays with the management company. So it really depends on your contracts. Once again, do you have a preferred ratio of cash flow debt service? Not really. Do you defer to accountants to give their approval? Yeah, I have my whole team look at the deal. I want my lawyer that knows mergers and acquisitions to look at the deal. It's who, not how. I don't know this stuff. I screwed up the first time. I have the right people in place. I understand now what to look out for as well. And so I just give it to them and I have them handle it. So I have a full team that I just make. What makes the deal worth 2x versus 5x? There's a lot of stuff there. So I'm going to keep going because I think a lot of you guys are asking good questions, but I do have some other stuff that's going to answer a lot of these questions. False belief number 3, guys. False belief number 3. It's buying yourself another job. When I first bought my first company, it was like buying another job. 2 managers left. Clients were all unhappy. I made all of the mistakes. I paid too much, misclassified employees, insurance liabilities. I had to pay for all of that out of pocket. And I realized I wasn't making as much money because of all of these other factors. And I also bought myself a job. I was working 16 to 18-hour days. Great. So do your due diligence. Anyways, I did that. And that's obviously buying yourself another job. But if you do the proper due diligence, like I mentioned before, like we currently manage 50 plus homes with Stage You Like, the first company that we bought. And it's a self-functioning business. I barely spend any time in the business and we're running it like a business. I went from 0 employees in that business to 11 VAs, 2 managers, a COO, and more. Like we just have this great system that works. And if you guys want to buy the right company, you can buy. In that case, I would have probably just rolled up that business if I could go back, but just bought the contracts. But I bought the whole business as a business entity, and I shouldn't have because it was 15 contracts going back. It should have been by management revenue, but I bought it as a EBITDA. And so that was my mistake. But if you have a fully functioning business, you get to decide what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And so you can finally focus on things you love doing instead of having to go from scratch and try to build that business up. So when you build a business, you actually get to the point where you're not like, I think that's the crazy thing is people are like, either they say, I don't have time for co-hosting, or they say, I don't want to buy myself another job, or I'd rather just do it myself. And so when you do it yourself, you're working crazy hours. I feel like when you buy a business, yes, in the beginning, it's a little tough with the transition, but after the transition, the 30, 60, 90 days, you should be at a point where your systems are running and you're in full function. If you follow the model correctly, like you shouldn't be in the business that much. And I've had people that had 30, 35 properties while working a W-2 job, 60 hours a week. Not to say that it's for everybody, but there are ways to go about it. So it's not the end of the world, especially if you have teams in place. But I think a lot of people get caught up in this whole idea of, I don't want to buy myself another job. I don't want whatever. I see it as a business entity that I can sell down the line if I add value and as a cash flow machine. So for me, business makes sense. And a lot of tax write-offs, obviously, each their own. And then also the last false belief that I get, and then we'll get into questions, I promise. The last false belief is that only big companies do acquisitions, and there's really not that many deals in this area for the small guys. Let me tell you guys something. How many boutique hotels, by classification boutique hotels, do you think are in the United States? I want you guys to literally write it on in the chat. How many of you guys think just write in the chat. I want to know what you guys think. And I'm going to tell you what it is. 10,000, 11,000, 50,000. There's 4,800. So 4,800 boutique hotels. Now, when you consider motels and you consider small hotels, there's around 20,000. So there's a good amount. Now everyone's trying to go and flocking towards buying a boutique hotel, which is great. I think it's awesome. I think that you can get good cash flow, you can get good appreciation. But I like businesses because I needed more cash flow than even a boutique hotel can offer. I needed that 20, 30 grand or even 10,000 a month. If I could buy all my time back and make 10,000 a month, I know that I'd be in a great position. I can quit my job and it would be great. And so that's the idea, right? So can you guys guess how many vacation rental companies are in the United States? You want to take a guess? I'm curious if you guys want to put in the chat. 2,000, less than 1,000, 65,000, 5,000. Okay. So there's 25,000 vacation rental management companies in the whole United States. And that's data that I got from, shoot, I should probably get that quoted. It's online. You can look it up. Not everything online is true, but I think it was Hostfully or PMS or something like that. I think it was Hostfully. Now, granted, you might be asking yourself, that's crazy. How is that the case? Now, I want to ask you guys this. What is the number one vacation rental manager in the country? It's Vacasa. Okay. What percent of the market does Vacasa own? Like in terms of manage of all vacation rentals in the United States, what percentage does Vacasa manage? 10%, 10%, 5%, 2%. It's actually 2.67%. So the number one vacation rental manager manages 2.67% of the market. What does that mean? That means that we are living in a time where it is incredible opportunity to be able to go in and buy these management companies. It's a super segmented market where there's a lot of mom and pop shops out. There's 25,000 to be specific. Now, these opportunities are things that you can come up with all the time. And now the more that you go into this space and the more that people are reaching out to me all the time with vacation rental management companies. And I see it, but like, it's harder to see it when you're just looking and browsing online, because sometimes they're just under Lauren, and Lauren is a self-operator with 30 properties on Airbnb or on VRBO. And maybe they're not on Airbnb. So it's like, how do you find these people? How do you understand where they are? Like, how do I know where to get to and all this kind of stuff? And it's the whole idea, which is like, these big conglomerates, they'll usually look for anything that's 50 plus, 100 plus. They'll look for those bigger operators so they can push into a market really effectively. So these big operators are trying to push into markets effectively. And so they're going to look to buy those companies. And even then, those companies, here's the crazy thing. And I'm telling you, this blew my mind. And through just talking to so many freaking people, even just recently, in the last 2 weeks, I had another company reach out to me and say they don't want to sell to anybody like Vacasa. They want to sell to me. Why me? And so this is the way that it works in this world, is the Vacasas, the V-Trips, the whatever of the world, everyone's stealing Vacasa clients. Why? Because they suck, okay? They're not good at operating at scale. They're not adapting like we small operators are adapting, that understand hospitality. Hospitality is a personal thing, and there's a lot of personal touch to it. And there's a way to build that locality that other big operators are not able to do quite well. There's a few that do it really well, like Casago, but that's because they do the franchise models and they have people in boots. And that's how they were able to scale to 4,000 plus units, is because they have people in boots on the ground. Now, granted, why would they want to sell to the small guy? It's crazy, because they want somebody to carry the legacy. And when I say that, I mean it. It's because every time I talk to somebody, they're like, we got approached by Vacasa. They wanted 1.5 million, but honestly, I don't want to sell it to them. They eventually end up selling it to us they want to let it go to us for $1 million. And it's like, why would you take $500,000 cut? It's because they've developed relationships with these owners. They know these owners. They understand that they go to freaking coffee with these owners. They play pickleball with these owners. They hang out with these owners. They know all the staff. They see the staff. They love the staff. They're employing these staff 10 years, great relationships, great company. Why would they want to sell to Vacasa? There's a story with this one guy in San Diego, and I don't know if this is an exaggerated story, but this is what I've heard. This guy sold his company to Vacasa, or one of the big players, I forgot what it was, and they lost the first year probably a lot. I think it was like 40% of their inventory, and in that year, they drove him out of town because the owners were pissed that their revenue started going down, their investments started to freaking plummet. All the employees got fired that they had great friendships with. sabotage the business, not on purpose, but just sometimes there's things within businesses that people don't do good due diligence on, or they just don't know how to operate it correctly. And so now these people drove that guy out of town because you're a freaking sellout. You sold it to a big company and you didn't give a shit about us. And so these people are scared of that. And not all acquisitions go that bad, obviously, but there are people that will be in a position where they're like, I know that I rather to sell to this small guy that I know, that I trust. I've built a rapport with them. I know who they are. And to the point where even the last company, we failed 2 SBA loans, putting us back 6 months. We could have had this company 6 months ago. And they still looked at us dead in the eye and said, we're willing to make this work. There's nobody else that we're willing to sell to. You guys are the choice. It's just a matter of fact of getting it done. And that is the world that we live in. So you have an incredible opportunity to be able to go into this industry. And not only that, but you also have the factor of you had all these operators that didn't adapt 10 years ago. They had these property management companies, and it was the Wild West. Everyone was doing short-term rentals. They're making crazy money. Ask anybody that did it in 2016. I'll say the same thing. And they're making great money. It's awesome. You don't have to be as competitive. Property management software, you didn't even need to. Sometimes you just did direct bookings. That's it. And whatever. And all of a sudden you have this crazy shift. 2020 blew up. And they were overworked. These people are going from, oh my God, we're making some money, to making, wow, so much money that they can fathom, and working crazy hours. And now they're working a lot, but not making the same returns. And now there's competitors like all of us, individual competitors, are coming into the market and saying we can perform better, and stealing clients like Vacasa and all these big management companies, seeing their inventory start dying out. And they're realizing, like, what are we doing wrong? And what can we do? And that opportunity now is the opportunity where it's getting so competitive, especially in a place like Joshua Tree. I look at competition saturation as my freaking friend, because when I see competition saturation, I see opportunity to make things better. And when I take over a business, the first business, just on pricing strategy alone, I increase revenues for all owners 30%. Now, imagine the kind of trust you can build right off the bat if you can just do pricing strategy and already make 30%. Not on top of that, the valuation of the company also went up, and so on and so forth. Now, that is a huge thing that you can play into. Obviously, like Frank said, it's a relationship with the existing host selling out. You don't want to sell out. And they know this in the deep down, and sometimes they don't see a way out. Sometimes they'll sell out, or they'll do that kind of thing. Not sell out. Maybe they say this is the way to go. I just recorded a podcast with my broker that sold to TurnKey, and he regrets the way he did it. And I'm telling you, it's a real thing. And I'll share more stories. I'm more than happy to share the stories, guys. It's not like I'm just sitting up here and just bullshitting you guys. Like, this is stuff that happened in this space. I know there's a lot of stories, like even Yosemite, Vacasa's story, where he lost 50% of the owners after 1 to 2 years. There's all about carrying their legacy. That's what you guys are here to do. So you guys can do it. You guys can do it. It's a great opportunity. There's ways to offset risk. There's, you're not buying yourself another job if you do it correctly. If you do the due diligence correctly, you're not screwing yourself or putting yourself in too much debt. It's just like buying a short-term rental or anything else. And yeah, there's a lot of opportunity, guys. And I know I couldn't fit everything into a 1-hour training. Like, it's just so hard, especially with a lot of questions you guys have. And I'm gonna get into the questions now. Okay, let's just start answering questions. Okay, what's going on, man?
How you doing, man? Thank you for hosting this, first of all. Second of all, I was wondering, how do you find the deals besides the LoopNet, Biz Buy Sell? Because if this is all the Wild West, it's not listed anywhere. How do you find it?
Yes, great questions. Most times, I mentioned this earlier, but I'll mention again. Most times, people are not really looking to go public about their management company. I wouldn't want to go public about my management company because,
I agree
one,
with you.
it takes a specific buyer, but also I don't want anybody to think that, like, oh, like, I'm selling out, I got to dip, I got to leave, and people just leave the contracts in case I can't sell it. I'm in a screwed position as an owner. I think a lot of times people don't want that to happen, which is why a lot of them are off market. Now, there are some on buy, biz, sell, that kind of thing. One way I like to do is I like to connect with brokers. So that's one way, is brokers are huge. Broker connections, it's like realtor connections, broker connections, same thing. You go out, whatever. Now there's pros and cons of that. The pros are going to be they have the deal flow for you. The cons are going to be you can't really negotiate as much. They put the package together. They do all the due diligence for you, which is great. That's awesome. And they put it in a nice packet. But then also there's only so much you can negotiate with. You can do terms and stuff, but they've already set the expectation of what the valuation would be for that company. You see what I mean? As opposed to going into a relationship right off the bat, you can actually create things a little bit more to your advantage. And you could be a little bit more, if they have a number set in their head, they might not want to change from that number. Because if a
That's all
broker
they
said,
want.
yeah, they want that number. So
Exactly.
I would say off market's huge. My deal flow came from me going to lunch meetings with people in my market. So lunch meetings have been awesome. I was going for a different purpose, but it happened to be they wanted to sell, which is awesome. I identified that in the conversation. So there's ways to identify it. Like, for instance, you never want to go to somebody that's, I'm looking to scale so fast and you don't, they're going to be like, oh yeah, I'd sell it. But it's, dude, you're going to sell it for whatever you think the future value of that company is. It's not going to be something that's, okay, I'm already settled. I've been chilling for 3-4 years. Those are the best people to look to buy from.
Yeah.
Off market, LinkedIn Sales Navigator, emails, I've seen it all, like literally cold calls. I have scripts for what I say and how I like deal with because I have VAs do it for me. Once again, I'm lazy. I had VAs kind of do the sourcing for me in some cases. So that kind of is really the way to structure it. It's off market and it's rapport based. Huge, like lunch, dinners. We went on like 10. Before we really got together, I think it was like 7 follow-ups before I even got them to come to lunch with me. And then once it came to, wow, I would never consider selling, but I would love to sell to you. And that was the conversation. Months and months process because of the SBA loans, which is our fault. But yeah, it's just about building rapport. And so like you could do better in person, but you got to figure out how to get your foot in the door with off market.
Okay.
Brokers off market is best. And then buy, bis, sells, obviously just cherry on top. If you get something on there and something's not moving, you can potentially negotiate. But I love the cold outreach. Events are another great way, like VRMA, IMN, that kind of thing. You bump into a lot of people. I haven't done that personally, but I know other people that have bumped into people that were looking to sell. But at the same time, I know that those people that are going to events are looking to progress and grow. And a lot of times you're going to be paying the premium. So I'd rather go to somebody that's not really looking to grow and chilling and is overstretched and can't really go to those events or doesn't want to. Those are my kind of target.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, no, good question, Bijan. How do you get around needing a real estate license and a property management license in some states? This is a very popular question, Patrick. And so this is one of the biggest gray areas, right? The first management company that we bought, we had a broker that was already part of the deal and they were getting a payment or sorry, they were an equity percentage. That's how they did it. And so eventually turned into a payment. And so like you pay them X amount per month to be like, I think it was like he came up to an agreement of $1,000 a month to hold his license and take on the liability of having a real estate trust account. Now, granted, the third acquisitions, when we bought into the business, they were operating things where they didn't have a real estate broker account, but they still did the trust accounting, which is needed. And they literally went through every single kind of resource to show that was enough to be able to be a valid property management company as long as they were not doing anything over 30 days. Because it's considered a short-term lease. It's not a long-term lease. But who's right? Who's not? I called the real estate commissioner. They said anything that's under 7 days is a short-term lease. I called other people, giving me different answers. Other people are like referred to the book or to the code book, and the code book's not clear. It's what is a rental though, or what is a lease? It's just so much definition. It's such a gray area, is what I'm trying to say. If you are going to do it, make sure you do trust accounting. If you're going to do it without a broker's license, which it's just risk tolerance at that point. Make sure you have your broker's license or not broker's. Make sure you have your trust accounting down. Make sure you're doing it right and the right accounts are paying the right people. That's huge. Make sure you're following all the rules and regulations with that because that's going to be big. And then also make sure you have liability protections in place. That's huge. And so yeah, operating accounts, trust accounts, that kind of thing. Yeah, probably doesn't answer your question. I need like a whole freaking session to go over trust accounting alone. But hopefully that helps, like in a high level. And now, if you can't do that, co-hosting is another way to do it. Trust accounting, you have client funds go to trust account. At the end of the month, you reconcile. You send over the balance over to the operating account. You pay out certain staff from the trust account. You pay out certain staff from the operating account. Okay. Trust account, you pay cleaners and you pay you pay anything that's property level. And then anything that's like operations or your business, you pay out of the operating account. That's pretty
And
much
is that, thank you for that. And thanks
Yeah.
for setting this up. Is that, I've never heard of that before, but I did operate in Nevada. So I read through the whole website and talked to them. And it, like you said, it is a little bit of a gray area sometimes, but they had never mentioned anything about, they just mentioned where's the money exchange? That's what they asked. And the way we set up our business is a little bit different. All the money goes to the owners and we invoice the owners. So to get a skirt around some of that stuff, but I never heard of that trust accounting. So I'll definitely look into that. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And it might vary state by state. It will vary state by state, how the rules and regulations go and everything. But that's across the board. That's something that's like common is when you do things like this, you have to have a trust account. And the reason behind it is because it's client funds. And the real estate broker's license, the reason that people say you need a real estate broker's license, because when people sue you, they can't go after those client funds. Does that make sense? And so and that real estate broker account only accounts for California. And so if you have a California broker's license, you only get California. And so if you're going to Arizona, you got to get Arizona. So and bigger companies like Casago, they told me they have general managers in every state that manage the whole thing, that have their broker's license. So that's how they do it. So everyone's got a different method. Some people just do it. They're like, I looked everywhere and I did all the research, and as long as I'm doing this trust accounting, it should be fine. Better safe than sorry. My business partner is working on his broker's license now, so we don't have to pay that fee anymore, but everyone does it a little differently.
Thank you.
What's going on? Quick question for you. So when you take over a company, you said you're keeping all their same systems in place. Are you not even having your VAs respond to those messages, or using the other company's VAs if they have it?
Yeah, I want to clarify. So I don't keep all the systems in place. It depends on the situation. So with the last company, I knew that the leads were really important. So it was just structured a certain way where we have these house managers, and these house managers are critical because they have the relationship with the owners. So if they leave, we're fucked. And so I knew that I needed to have those relationships first, and we have great relations with all of them. And I knew that I couldn't make change too fast. So I just got them on Slack this month, and it was in a 60-day plan. Like I said, I make a plan for this now because I know what I'm doing, but 60 days is when we had a transition for owners and for the leads or the house managers to go on. But I didn't want to make that change too fast. I didn't want to make it in the first month. Like, hey, we're the new guys, we're changing everything.
Yeah.
And that's very taunting. And it's called change management. There's a whole philosophy around that. I took a whole business class in business school. I took a class. It's probably the only thing that I'm like, one of the few things I've used from business school, but it was really great. It's just about like, how do you get the right people in that have influence in the company to be able to push change that you need to get pushed, and how do you make that happen? So yes, we do make change, to answer your question, and we do have VAs, but and we do transition for VAs, but right now the owners are not, like, usually what we'll do is we'll have the VAs talk to the owners, which makes it, that's, by the way, if you guys don't do that, like, that transforms the game, because now I'm operating at a scale that other people can't operate on, because I have my VAs responding to owners. And so, like, things like that, like having those kind of conversations, like, we have a set phase in to the new way of doing it. So we do use the same systems across the board, and we see what, obviously we're looking at the books. So we're seeing like, okay, there's a $7,000 accounting expense. Then this is like real. This has actually happened. I'm like, this is ridiculous. They paid way too much for accounting. And so we know we can get that down. And so, like, things like that, we make changes as time goes on, but we can't do it right away because that accountant is relying on this business. This is like their one main account that they have. And so taking away somebody's salary like that it's a touchy subject. Like, you could piss people off. You can also piss owners off. There's just a lot of stuff that you have to think about when you're doing this. You have to be thread very carefully. And that's why the plans are so key when the transition is actually going to be part of my program as well. As like, that transition is going to be so critical to make sure that, like, your owners don't all bail. Because the first day when we took over, this is a small town, everyone started calling everybody. All the owners, these are high-end owners. So these are like, I have owner of Erewhon as one of my owners. She started freaking out. You don't want, and then they start all talking to each other, and some of them know each other and some of them don't. And so now you're getting, through the grapevine, this person's pissed, or there's the grapevine, they're appalled. And then so you have to manage that. That was more important to me than changes with systems in the beginning. It was like, okay, let's talk to the owners. By the way, just update, all owners have stayed. We have not had one owner leave from the last acquisition. Obviously, there's going to be churn, but also we didn't onboard, but we signed on 2 incredible properties. So it's already like a slam dunk. And then also on top of that, any property that didn't belong in the last acquisition that we dished it out to Stays You Like, which is our other company. And so anything that's not luxury, we dish it out, and now our other company's making money. And so that's because we have the referral source coming in through the more luxury company. And so I think we've like signed like 10 leads probably at this point. And we have a bunch that were 10 contracts, and then we have a bunch that are like waiting since that was like a month and a half. So that's huge revenue. So that kind of thing.
So you have no interest in like putting everything under your brand. You'll keep the brand of the companies that you acquire.
Yeah, so it's a per basis. So it depends. Like with them, like they really cared about the legacy. And I knew they also really cared about the brand, and I knew that their brand had weight. And so that's why I didn't want to get rid of the brand, because and they were functioning differently from this company. So this company didn't have house managers. This company has house managers, a very upscale experience, but they're also charging 25-30% to like big properties. They're making like 5-6 grand a month on houses.
Jesus.
These houses are making like 20-25 grand at 30%. Like not all of them, but there's some that are very high end and do a lot of work with them, hands-on work. There's a lot of expenses on our end, but also like we do a really good job for them. So it just depends on the acquisition. Okay, Daniel, what's up, man?
Hey, what's going on, man? Hey, question. I love how you scaled just recently too. I've been seeing your progress, so it's really awesome. We have about 75 listings right now, and our organization, like we use WhatsApp, right? We use Google Chat, we use what else, Andrea? We use different things. So we're trying to get organized. So I think you mentioned you use Slack, but I don't know if you can share like what you're doing to keep organized and just have it structured, just briefly, obviously, and then I maybe can connect the dots.
Okay, dude. I think so. Okay, okay, so just a little bit about my background. My background is very like I built businesses since I was 14 years old. Like I've been doing this for a long time, and I knew how to build teams, and I knew how to build structure, and I knew how to get the right people in place to build out what we need to build out. So we have a COO that does a lot of this, but in the beginning I had to do a lot of it. So that knowing that background, that world, I know that there is value to having Slack versus WhatsApp. I think right off the bat, if I was you, 100% get rid of Slack. WhatsApp, the problem with WhatsApp is you don't have the ability to allow the scalability and the integration wise between the different applications that exist in this tech stack, in this space, especially right now when we're going into AI capabilities and AI capabilities. These AI companies are building integrations within Slack. And so that's what I'm saying is like just for positioning purposes, especially as you're looking to scale and like understand, okay, like how can I get to, I know you segment things out in WhatsApp and people do that, but you're at 70 now, you're like getting into the big boy leagues. And you should, in my opinion, I think you should find some more commercial utilization of communication, because communication is everything. If things get missed within communication, balls drop, that means you can literally you can lose a client over that, right? Like that stuff can get really dicey. And so that's why I 100% recommend Slack. I 100% would segment out different workflows. Like our COO does all this because I want to focus on sales. I want to focus on acquisition. So she organizes it all. And I hired somebody's salary to do that. And so that might be something that you could consider, especially if anybody has read Rocket Fuel. It's a great book on business. It's basically the idea of finding an integrator to the visionary. I'm assuming, Daniel, since you're here, you're trying to grow, you're more of like a visionary, and finding somebody that can execute on your vision is going to be huge, and to be able to put these processes in place. So ours now, it's taking this to the next level, and she's built SOPs and structures and systems for like how we do everything. Like where, for instance, like if an issue comes up, where do we find the central information for that issue? The central information is on monday.com, or the central information is here. or if there's an issue with, or if we're updating on a client and seeing like how a client's doing, where do we go for that information? So everyone has visibility into everything, and information is so critical in communication, and information is like big in an organization. So having a central location for that, like Slack, is huge. I know I mentioned Slack a few times. I swear I'm not sponsored by them, but that's what we use, and it's a game saver or game changer. So things like that. Now, obviously, eventually you start getting into what other things you want to have. I built out an Excel model that tells me before the month ends how much money we're going to be making from management revenue. So I know how much money I'm going to be coming in with. So I know what kind of business decisions I can make ahead of time. So like the faster you can get information and feedback from your business, the better you can make like game level decisions. So like normally in this business, people have to wait until the 15th of the next month to know what the hell happened, in that month. Like in 45 days ago, what happened there, you're already too late at that point. I want to be making game decisions on, understanding like, okay, what is my seasonality? What am I making this month like estimated? And then use like the reports and things like that to actually make those decisions. So like information is everything. Information, communication, and obviously there's a lot of other things. I'm probably just jumping everywhere, but the idea is to have to really invest a lot of money and time into systems. And if you have to get the right people to work on those systems, have them work on it, because it's going to be critical. Because right now, like what happens is like reliance on employees. Like you start relying a lot on employees, and then, or if you're empowering them, if you're doing it correctly and scaling the correct way, and you're not trying to be involved, you're going to start relying on employees. And then the moment they leave, you're screwed. And it's unless their position is dialed in terms of like everything. So that's what I'm saying is, what if an employee leaves? Like you have to ask those what if questions. What if this happens? Like a key employee leaves, like all your WhatsApps, Slack, like how do you like put somebody in? And if I have Slack, I can just get them in the right channels, and they can go and search history and figure stuff out, because information's all on there. So things like that. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, you answered everything. I appreciate it. Yeah, we'll definitely look into Slack. We've already messed with AI for answering messages. I had to tell my VAs, hey, your job's not in jeopardy, but you're going to do more high level things rather than just chit chatting away with guests. So we're thinking of that. I even looked at Trainual. It might not be the good. Yeah, that'll be great for SOPs, but we didn't launch with that. But we do have Monday, so I love to hear that we are doing some of the things you're recommending. But I definitely am going to look into Slack, and we'll go from there. Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Of course. Money.com, anything that's reviews, pool heating, or anything like schedule disputes, claims, have them all in Slack or in all Monday.com, and have that integrated with Slack. Tony, what's going on, man?
Hey, Patrick, I appreciate you doing this call today. I just wanted to add to what you just talked about with Slack and the systems integrations, because that's actually, we were just working on this today with my operations manager, and we are heavily on WhatsApp, but basically because of our cleaners. And as you probably know, our cleaners are like one of the most important team members, but we use subcontractors. And so a lot of them are not very tech savvy. And I don't know if there's a way to integrate Slack into somebody who's without having to have a license for that particular person, because for them, it's just been, they're like, hey, I use WhatsApp, it's easy, but I definitely hear your point about integrating into Slack. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on how you've been able to, that change management, get some of those contractors to be able to integrate into Slack, or if that's even possible.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good question. So I'm in Joshua Street. I get a lot of people that are meth heads and crazy people. And I'm like, how am I going to get these people on Slack? Not everyone there is like that, but there are definitely people that are just, I don't know if they can use a phone, but that's why we create standards. So standards, we pay. So when you pay well, you have luxuries. One of the reasons why we pay cleaners well and why we give them the money that we do is because we are able to create those standards of what we believe they could be doing. So for example, one of the things like, do you have a phone? Do you have a car? Like those things are important to us, because we don't want somebody just being dropped off and then they're just not there. And if we need somebody to like go get something, they don't have a car. It gets really messy. So we require cars, we require for 1099 job of a cleaner. And then we also require you to have work within our systems. And so what that means is if you, and on Slack, they'll do a thing where for each regular member that you have, you can have 5 free members. I forgot what they're like, limited members. They're considered single channel guests. That's what they are. So single channel guests, you only need one channel. So you just make one channel for them. And eventually, once you scale to a big level, you just have somebody on vendor management and they'll be in those groups. And that VA will be the one that will just be communicating with the cleaners and making sure that anything that comes up, they can just message the chat. So they can message chat. Now, if they want to call in, they're all about phones. That's why we use open phone. We don't have our cleaners have access to our managers' phone numbers because one, we need some central inbox for everybody to use. All the VAs, everybody can use that one inbox, which is so key. And a second thing is we don't want them to have our numbers just in case they get pissed off or something happens. There's people that are going in and out of jail, like the dad's husbands, like crazy things. Like we don't want to get involved in that. So like having personal phone numbers is like a really bad thing. So having Slack is really easy, especially for single guests. We have an SOP of how we do it for when we onboard cleaners. We have, okay, get set up on bill.com, get set up with this. Like it makes our life easier. So bill.com for any contractor that we work with, they get paid once a week. They live paycheck to paycheck. So paid once a week has to be the way. And that's the way we function. And so they submit their invoices. We look over we have the accountants look over the invoices and then they pay them out. Slack is one of the requirements. It's super easy when you only have one channel. So they're going to be only on one channel. It's going to be your channel. And they're going to have, and there's their own channel. It's going to be like what, let's say her name is Laura. So it's going to be dash SYL, which is stays you like, dash Laura, staff dash Laura.
Awesome.
So,
thank you for that.
For sure.
And what was the name of the phone system you said you're using?
Open phone.
Awesome. So that goes all to one place, text messages as well?
Everything. So all the communication with like, even if a city calls, you put a phone number for the city. You can have a different phone number for the city that calls all day. You could do so much. There's a lot of stuff, but open phone's incredible. And you can get all your VAs to message from one inbox for guests. It's key. It makes things so much easier. I'm also realizing that a lot of people love this kind of content of like how to structure the business. That might be a second thing, right? Once you buy the business, how do you operate the business at a high level? Like we can talk about that kind of stuff, but yeah, we'll do that. Shameless plug. I own a SaaS agent that competes with Monday.com, integrates with Slack. There you go. It's fixed pricing. So yeah, there's a bunch of ways that people do it.
Thank you for listening. If you found this helpful, please give us a follow and leave us a 5-star review. Your support truly means a lot. And connect with Patrick in the show notes below. Until next time.